What the Tech is brought to you by Text Expander. Text Expander helps you communicate smarter. Visit textexpander.com/podcast for 20% off your first year. Everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian. Of course, I'm joined by my lifelong friend, Paul Thurrott. We went to elementary school together, right, Paul?
Probably not.
I had to do a sacrifice in order to keep my youth. That's the difference. This is a show all about technology. We cover everything from Microsoft to Apple to phones and also media consumption. We talk about everything. We've picked up a lot of new viewers over the last couple of weeks. We've been releasing the show only via podcast and on YouTube due to a lot of work being done on my house at the worst possible time ever. So they've been having to cut the power, and I really didn't want to deal with the internet being cut. So I haven't been doing the show live. But we are live now. We're doing the show live. We're going to be doing a live Q&A at the end of the show. Paul and I have a lot to talk about. Obviously, we're going to talk about just what we're doing right now, because this is a very bizarre moment in everybody's life. A lot of new viewers are discovering the show. A lot of younger viewers, a lot of older viewers. It's amazing when you have nothing to watch, you'll always find me. That's how it works.
You're always our last resort.
Yep. That's how it is. So last week we did not have a show, but a lot of the messages I've been seeing from people. First of all, people want to know, did you watch Tiger King yet?
Not yet.
Okay. You got to watch it.
I will.
That shit crazy. You got to watch it. But
You got to get through Ozark first.
Yeah.
We'll get through it.
What is it? Season 3, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm curious how people's media consumption has changed over the last month or so, because what I have noticed and from just conversation with people is that people are discovering that YouTube is not just for the computer, and that you could actually watch, other than there's a whole group of people, like my father, for example. All my father watches on YouTube is car repair videos and cooking clips, like how to make fried chicken or make whatever. He's now discovered that, oh, wait, there's a entire series by this guy named Mustang on Twitter, and it's about commercial airlines and different planes that commercial airlines have had, like the Douglas Airlines and how, their planes kind of, the Douglas airplanes, and how one bad plane kind of ruined everything for the company. He's discovered all these, and I was talking to him. That's why I know so much about this conversation, because he told me about this, and he's like, I didn't know you could watch that on YouTube. And to me, I would imagine you could watch anything on YouTube, but to an entire group of people, they don't know that content like this exists. And this is the guy that knows I do podcasts. He goes, so what do? You put your stuff on YouTube? I'm like, I do. He goes, everybody else does? I'm like, a lot of people do. He's like, oh, find me a show about this. Find me a show about that. And he's been finding it. Do you think this is becoming a common thing? Because this has been a conversation I've seen happen more and more.
I've used YouTube like this for a long time, so I'm not really sure what to say. I mean, well, it's weird. Like last night, I actually watched a 90-minute documentary on YouTube. But I often watch short clips,
yeah. I see, this is the thing, right? I was always told, the YouTube thing was, well, if your video is over 15 minutes, nobody's going to sit there and watch it. But I think now there's been a major shift when it comes to long form content, especially when you're out of content to watch.
You can one thing I've also done recently with a different documentary on YouTube is something I do with some of the lengthier podcasts I listen to as well, is you could just listen to it or watch it in parts, right? I mean, everything you watch gets into your history on YouTube, and you can get to that pretty quickly. So you can kind of pick up where you left off. So I even if you don't want to sit there for 90 minutes or 2 hours, let's face it, we all have that time now, but whatever. But you can watch longer content in parts too.
Yeah. Right now, by the way, shockingly, as I
Mhm.
said this, the Joe Rogan interview with Bob Lazar just popped up on my YouTube.
Okay.
I think it knows. It knows that you're his number one fan.
Right.
Um,
Bob Lazar, that is,
Bob
not Joe
Lazar.
Rogan.
Bob Lazar. Yeah. Uh, I.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me how we're consuming content and how everything has changed. Like Zoom. People are using
Mhm.
Zoom they've never even heard of Zoom. I like
I
for
know, I
work
don't know how
stuff.
that happened.
So you know what's fascinating? I moved all my work stuff to Microsoft Teams, which I love.
Mhm.
I love Microsoft
Okay.
Teams now. I was not a big time user. I've used it in the past, but now I have
Mhm.
everybody on my team for my I guess my real job uh is on Microsoft Teams. I'm not really using
Okay.
Zoom for that. But for my happy hours that I do a digital happy hour almost every other day at like 4:30,
Mhm.
5 o'clock with my bartenders and a bunch of my friends.
Mhm.
Uh, we use Zoom for that,
Okay.
and these are people that would never use Zoom. So I think it's interesting how we're using stuff and how it's changed. Has anything
Andrew, the
changed
other
for
thing
you?
that's changed
Yep.
is people are talking on the phone more. So
Yeah.
this kind of old-fashioned form of communication, people just wanna hear each other's voices, you know?
Yeah. People just want to hear each other's voices. I spent an hour and a half last night talking to someone from my job that I rarely would speak to.
Right.
Especially on the phone. It's a quick message.
Mhm.
So I think human contact. That's something that we need and we strive for. This is going to be interesting when we come out of this, as far as how we interact,
Right.
how we communicate, things that we do, things that we don't do. I think a lot of this, we're going to see a shift, obviously, with that stuff. But to get to technology, you
Mhm.
had a story on Thurrott.com that there's a report that the Surface Neo will not launch this year. Now, I saw this
Right.
posted this morning. Has there anything changed with this report?
No, I mean, I've since talked this over with Mary Jo, who was the originator of the report, and, I think the background of this is that the fundamental changes that Microsoft's trying to make to Windows to make Windows NT a thing
Hmm.
is not going well. It's behind schedule, and that's a big part of it. And then, more specifically, you have issues around compatibility and performance, with existing applications, whether those things are going to work in Windows 10X. And then, maybe this isn't the greatest time to launch a product that's kind of iffy to begin with, even if everything was working okay.
So
Um,
before we talk about this, we should talk about Windows 10X, right? Because that's kind of the
yeah.
reason. Uh, Mary Jo Foley reported this, our friend,
Hmm.
that it has some serious issues.
Right. Right. But
What obviously compatibility, but do you have a list of what those issues are? Obviously, you have a great article on Thurrott Premium about this.
um, no, I would just say that there are two big components to Windows 10X, and both of them are very important. One of them is this new user interface, which has nothing to do with two screens, but Microsoft in their infinite wisdom has decided to pretend this is about two screens for some reason. But really, what it's about is making a simpler UI that's more mobile like, more like you'd see on Android or iOS or Chrome OS or whatever.
Yeah.
But then the other big piece of Windows 10X is that kind of fundamental architecture stuff, the underlying stuff that makes the operating system work. Because it's based on Windows 10, but they're sandboxing or containing legacy desktop applications to prevent them from infecting the rest of the system.
Hmm.
And this is something that people who look at Windows and have been thinking about how it could fit in the future have been talking about for a long time. You got to solve this problem, and Microsoft is trying to solve it with containers, software containers, and that's where you run into compatibility and performance problems because applications are just not running natively on the system anymore. So how does that work? It's
So
it's kind of a
essentially,
complicated thing.
it's emulating, correct? It's an emulation,
Um, I wouldn't. I don't
essentially.
think, strictly speaking, it's not exactly emulated. It's not exactly a virtual machine. It's more like a partitioned system where everything that is a legacy desktop application runs together in one part of the system, and it's protected and separated from the rest of it. And of course, you have to enable inter application communication. So if you have like a modern app running outside of that container, and you do like a cut and paste or whatever, it needs to work with a legacy desktop application that's inside that container. So they were talking about some level of compatibility at launch. They were saying how they would improve that over time.
Yeah.
This is something Microsoft has gone through in the past, when they make transitions to from 9x to Windows NT, or from 32-bit to 64-bit. I mean, it's the same, roughly speaking, is the same sort of thing where you kind of have to work at it, and eventually you get that application compatibility where you want it. So it's
So,
not, outside of Microsoft, a few people have ever run this on hardware. It's not really possible to know or say whether this thing runs well. you know, like obviously it's technically possible, but is it viable as a product?
yeah.
It's hard to say.
Well, the problem is when you
Um,
have a new system architecture of any sort, you're gonna have some sort of issues like this, especially with legacy software for
yeah,
compatibility.
yep,
From
yep,
your report and Mary Jo Foley's report, it's not just one thing. It's instability,
yeah. It's a bunch.
insecurity,
It's a
poor
bunch.
battery life. I mean, it's a plethora of issues with
Yeah,
System 32 software.
yeah. So you know, I, there are a lot of transitions like this that have occurred in history, in the history of personal computing. The Mac went from classic Mac OS to Mac OS 10, and they had this environment in Mac OS 10 that would run those legacy apps for a while, and eventually they got rid of it. It probably got better over time before they got rid of it, because of course it has to. Um, the other thing, on the Microsoft side, it's kind of tricky because Microsoft has been trying to move away from that legacy desktop stuff for a long time, but it has failed at every
But
step.
okay? So here's a it's kind of a full question.
Mhm.
Um, is have they failed at this due to their own doing or due to the market dictating what they need or want?
Honestly, I feel like their intentions were always good. It's just that people have expectations when they see Windows, and it's
Mhm.
reasonable. If I see this thing, it's got a desktop and a start button and a taskbar and a recycle bin on the desktop. I expect to be able to go to google.com/Chrome and download Chrome and run it. I expect that to work. It's a Windows application. But Microsoft has done things where they've created this thing that looks like Windows. It's exactly what I just described. But it can't go to google.com/Chrome and run Chrome because that's a desktop app, and this thing
Yeah.
is, doesn't allow that. And they've done that a couple times. So,
Yeah.
with this system, it's like, okay, look, we're going to let you run that thing. It's going to run in a container, but we're going to let you run it because we know that's important to people. So they've learned, Windows fundamentally is this thing. It runs those apps. Like that, if you make something that looks like Windows but doesn't run those apps, people don't care for it. And that's one of the things they have to get right. So unfortunately, I think the compatibility of this system is one of the problems. I don't think it's to where it needed to be for it to be viable. Like, what's the percentage that makes sense? Is it 80%, 90%? Is it 90% of the top 100 apps,
Yeah.
or
Well,
whatever? I don't know. I don't know.
eh,
I don't know.
nobody knows that number.
Yeah.
I don't know who the top 100 you're talking top 100 Win32 apps, right?
But it's
What would
so
I mean,
it's so
what would be
complicated
those
though.
but again, what would be those apps, right? You got
But it's
Microsoft
but
Office, but they're gonna have their own
that's
native version of that, so that's fine. You're gonna have Photoshop. You're gonna
well,
have I
well,
don't even know
okay,
how
but
to
you don't even
classify that.
but you don't have to worry about which the apps are, because the problem is the apps that you need, the apps that I need, the app that Bob needs, or whoever. There's always that one app, that one thing that someone relies on that may not work in this thing, and if that thing's not in there, then this system is not working for them. So
Yeah.
maybe I have a color laser printer that has a particular set of drivers that runs special software that lets me do whatever I want to do. That thing doesn't run on this system, then it doesn't matter if Office works. And
Got it.
like, everyone has these things, and I think that's they've not said this. They've never said anything about this, but um, I think for right now, the problem, that's part of the problem, is they've evaluated the compatibility and said, this isn't going to be where we need it to be at
So, what
launch.
kind of delay are we looking at here for launch?
They're just talking past the year,
Yeah.
so 2021 sometime.
Nick actually has a good question.
Mhm.
I know that we're talking about applications, but has there been any conversation regarding gaming on this platform for
No,
with compatibility?
no,
Nothing, right? Are they
no.
even
So I will say
considering
this:
that?
well, I complained about the dual screen thing. You got to the thing you got to remember about Windows 10 is that Windows 10X, sorry, is they're presenting it as a new platform aimed at these new dual screen devices, really PCs, but we'll just call them devices. And what I'm saying is it's not that. And I think they're doing this on purpose, not for the reason that maybe seems obvious. I think they want to limit the number of people that use this thing because only some people are going to want a dual screen device to begin with. Not to mention the fact that a dual screen device that isn't 100% compatible with software, um, it will restrict the audience to some small size, and they can improve it and keep testing it until they're ready to bring those features that matter, like the UX and this container system, to mainstream desktop versions of Windows 10.
Yeah.
So for right now, this thing does it's not going to run games. I mean, it'll run probably simple games, but I mean, it's not aimed at that. It's aimed at this kind of small dual screen device. It's kind of a productivity device, a reading device, that kind of a thing. And once they get this system up and running, I mean, will these containers ever be good enough to run like a modern desktop game? No, I don't. Probably not. Honestly, right? We're going to need modern games on the newer platforms at the
Yeah.
Windows 10 or 10X or whatever it is, and whenever it happens.
Yeah, I
So
mean it's an interesting predicament there. And so obviously this is another cause for the Surface Neo, the delay from them. Any news on the Duo? Is that delayed as well or no?
no, not yet. I mean, I don't. I guess when I look at these devices, I don't really think that a two screen device makes a ton of sense for the most part. But I will, if forced to pick. I mean, I think the Android phone style device makes more sense than a sort of PC device. So, um, Panos Panay apparently posted a photo the other day that was taken with the camera from this thing that suggests that work continues, and we'll see. But um, they didn't. No, the Mary Jo did not hear that it was delayed.
Hmm. Very interesting. I don't know what the answer for this device is, or even Windows 10.
I
Here's what
know.
we do know. They cannot have this turn into another Windows on ARM or
Right.
another Windows RT
Yep.
for sure. They can't
Yep.
have this be a half or Windows 10s, right? They have to make sure that when
Right.
this launches, this is a complete and functional system.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that's a big part of it.
in which, by the way, I applaud them. If this is if they are quick enough to recognize it and say, listen, we need some more time with this. We can't have, like you said, out of the top 100 apps, let's say 75, 85% are working. But the
Yeah.
second the others don't, the second that
Yeah.
10% doesn't work, that's all you're going to hear. It's going to be a
Yeah.
failure.
Oh yeah. Of course. Yep.
Uh, Frosty in our
Look,
chat says, why
Microsoft
not,
has the
Andrew?
data on this. One thing they allowed in Windows 10s or S mode or whatever was for people to turn it off, and everyone turned it off.
Mm,
Like they did, because
yeah,
Microsoft never talks about all the people using Windows 10s because no one's using it.
yeah,
And I don't mean literally. If you're out there using Windows 10s, God love you. But I mean, I mean, statistically, it's a failure.
yeah.
You know,
Did they? But I don't know how. The way that they released this was bizarre because they released it on a flagship device.
well, they were trying to make a point, and that failed.
And
So
what was that point? That you
that
could
point
run
was that because when this thing first launched, the assumption, which was incorrect, was that it was for Chrome OS competitors. Like we're gonna put it on like a little piece of crap education computer. It will compete with Chromebooks.
Yeah,
And Microsoft's point was like, no, like we think that people will want this across the board. That there'll be an executive with an expensive computer that wants the reliability and stability because there are advantages to the platform. Like if you
yeah,
don't care what apps you can run or whatever, I mean, there are advantages to it for sure. I mean, they didn't make it to be mean to people. I mean, it exists for a reason. But um, I always felt like with S mode or 10s that they could have done they could have achieved most of their goals just by having a whitelist that anyone could maintain and say, "Look, I'm only going to be in S mode,
Yeah,
except I want to run Google Chrome or whatever. Whatever the one app is. I have to be able to run Photoshop. The rest of it, I don't care. The rest of the time, you're in S mode, and I'm getting all the benefits. But you got to let me run the thing
yeah.
that I need to run." And the system was capable of doing this. They just didn't configure it that way. They were just too hard headed about it. It was too bad
That's interesting.
because it could have
Uh,
worked.
so what we're gonna do today while we do the show, I want it to be heavy on the chat and the Q&A.
Okay.
So we're gonna be incorporating the chat a lot. Christian right
All
now
right.
says, "I'm curious if I could run Hyper-V client or third-party tools like VMware workstations on Windows 10X. Would be useful for some legacy apps requiring a full OS binary."
Oh boy, no.
You don't think so?
That's
You don't think so? I mean,
You're
that's
kind
a
of
good
missing the point
question.
of Windows 10X. So, I mean, Windows 10X is not for games. It's not for developers. It's not for high end, it's not for workstations. I mean, especially as initially conceived. I mean, they're purposely designing it for low end machine, not low end, like portable kind of different form factor machines. I mean, obviously dual screens is what they're saying up front, but it's actually, when you think about it, Apple just adapted iPad OS to support trackpads and
Yeah, which
mouse,
I want to
mice and
talk
cursors.
about that next.
Yeah, so it's designed to compete with that, right?
Yeah,
They want to have
it's not
people
going
come
to.
out with, or companies come out with, like thin and light hardware that looks beautiful, and it's designed for that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, you can run a desktop application if you want in a container, and hopefully it works. It works well, whatever. It's not designed for the high end stuff. You're probably not going to be running Visual Studio on this thing. You're probably not going to be playing a Call of Duty game or whatever. It's not for that. Now, in the future, if it works, maybe they bring these things to Windows 10 desktop, and then we have a conversation. I mean, but I mean, for now, no. I mean, you're not going to be doing that stuff on 10x.
So, since you brought up Apple, because I do want to talk about the iPad and the
Hmm.
trackpad support, because I spent the entire day using it yesterday.
Okay.
With this thing. Where was it? I have the Magic Mouse, the Apple
Yeah.
Magic Mouse. Where the hell is this piece of
Yep.
garbage? Wherever it is. I probably dropped it. I want to talk about that, but I do want to talk about this before we go into that because that's going to be a long topic. So I had a
Hmm.
conversation with our friend John Prosser from Page Tech.
Okay.
John is, in his track record, has been pretty stellar with this stuff,
Hmm.
and he's been very honest about, when things are not, if he falls short on a leak or it was somebody trying to misguide him. But I kind of stand by John's stuff. He has
Okay.
a long list of information here that he sent me, and he did make public. If you follow him on Twitter, John_Prosser from Page Tech. He said,
Hmm.
so the iPhone 9 launch is going to be on the 14th or the 15th next week.
Right.
And Apple, I don't know if you heard the story about Apple's phasing out the Beats brand.
Oh, somebody asked me about that.
Yes, that is a John story. He broke that story.
Oh, okay.
So
I
the way
don't.
that it's looking,
Yeah.
and here's what he said. Apple
Okay.
over-the-ear headphones, code name B515. I
Yeah.
believe it's the Beats 700. It's going to be $350, aimed for WWDC. And the AirPod X, which is the one that people were. That's the big thing that people were questioning. What's the AirPod X? It's for
Hmm.
sports and running. It's like It's
Okay.
like Beats X. He says, here's the context behind this. Instead of just continuing to make headphones and audio products in parallel with Beats, once the AirPods brand has more of a significant range in products, they'll phase out the Beats and favor it for shipping products with the Apple branding on it, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense,
Interesting.
but
Yeah, it makes sense.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, but iPhone 9 coming out 14th or the 15th next week.
So
That's
the
what, according to
OnePlus
John.
8 series is coming out or being announced on the 14th as
Oh,
well. It'd be
interesting.
kind of interesting if both those things happened on the same day.
Yeah. I'm curious if there's pricing on that iPhone 9.
I heard it was $399 to start and 64, 128, and 256.
$399 is a great entry level, huh?
Yeah, it's good.
Great price.
Yep.
$399 I could justify getting as a secondary phone if I'm not in the. So here's okay. This is
Well,
how I see it, right? Original iPhone date was the 15th. They moved it to the 14th to, I'm gonna quote them, to fuck OnePlus in the news cycle.
okay.
$399.
Shit.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
$399.
Well, that's interesting. By the way, the OnePlus phones are going to be very expensive, and compared to how they have been historically, because they're going to be 5G capable, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes you're gonna think I'm a fucking psychopath for saying this. I lost
mhm,
my AirPods today. Okay, I couldn't find it. I
okay.
lost it for like a week. Can't find it. And out loud, I said, "All right, enough. Can you effing bring it back to me?" To nobody. I just found it behind me on the floor. Okay,
Oh god.
This is what the quarantine has done. I'm speaking to ghouls and ghosts in my house, begging them to
Sure.
bring back drunken misplaced items.
I
Uh,
have a.
yeah. So here's some more thing, and then I want to go into the iPad story. John says,
Yep.
by the way, this is the second time they've moved the launch to the same day of a OnePlus product launch.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Not a great company.
Guys,
What are
John
they afraid
Prosser,
of
front
from
page tech.
OnePlus? I mean, like,
Yeah.
seriously.
Why them? Why bully them?
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah. But here's where I see this as being kind of important, right? That they have a $399 first run iPhone, right? First
Yeah.
run, not an older generation. I have an Android phone. I have a Samsung phone. By the way, now I have this, right?
What's this?
I have an iPhone 11, but I also have an
Of course.
Android phone. It
Yep.
took me a while to want to get an iPhone. Took me a while.
Okay.
The the reason why it took me a while is because I was in the Android ecosystem and I really didn't want to jump ship and start over. And the pricing, right? I had to justify
Yeah.
spending, at the time it was the iPhone 7 when I got the iPhone, but I had to justify spending about $800, $900 on an iPhone if I want to get the
Mhm.
latest and the greatest. For $399, you know what?
I know.
It's a very tempting leap for any Android user. And I'm not saying that this is what they're going to do. I'm not saying that Android
Well,
users are going to flood this, but you don't have to think as hard.
it's a I don't know, it's an iPhone 8 form factor. That's the one problem. I mean, it's not it's got a big bezel on the top and the bottom. It's got a fingerprint reader instead of a Face ID. It's but the innards are modern. I mean, to me, what this is a great phone for me as a parent. If my kid needs a new phone, like, this would be the one I'd go for, because it's going to last for years. It's got all the modern innards and everything, which is great. For me as an
Yeah.
adult, like, as the primary, for one thing, I don't like the size. It's too small. They don't have the bigger version. But some of that old fashioned stuff, from to me personally, I would not be all that interested. But I think this is one of the smartest things they've ever done. I think they're going to sell a ton of these things,
Yeah. Yeah, I think
because there
so
are
too.
people who want to be in that ecosystem and can't afford the more expensive stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
By the way, John said DM me for you to DM him. I,
For
I,
me
I
to
don't like
DM,
this. I don't like this at
okay,
all. That you guys are now, uh,
we'll go after
uh,
Andrew.
yeah, it's over for me. You got a younger boy with more fame and fortune than me. I hope you're happy. No, he said,
Right.
tell Paul to DM me. I'll message you for what.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the Apple conversation, but by the way, before we
Mhm.
do, I want to thank everybody. We've gotten a ton of people sign up for our Patreon over the last week and a half. You guys don't know how much of a help that is. For people who don't know, Paul and I make money off the show. Paul gets paid
Well,
a little bit, pennies. And what
yeah.
we take from this, and all joking aside, is that you guys fund us on Patreon and we're able to split that profit and we're able to kind of put money, and keep this going and give you guys content. If you enjoy the show, we provide you with a bonus show each and every week following this show on patreon.com/whatthetech. That's patreon.com/whatthetech. You can go there and fund us as little as $1 per episode, and it keeps us going along. Also, we're going to hit our goal of 10,000 subscribers this year on YouTube. I think we're at 6,200, 6,100, something like that. If you hit the subscribe button, it'll further us in this quest to hit 10,000 subscribers here on YouTube. So I spent the entire day yesterday using
Mhm.
the iPad with a trackpad,
Yeah.
my iPad Pro. I
Mhm.
got to tell you, Paul, I enjoyed it way more. Obviously, the operating system is not made for this, right? Like clicking around and doing stuff. But the next
I don't know.
generation will
I
most
like the way
likely.
it works.
Do you?
Yeah. I think it. I don't know. It seems very natural.
Yeah, No, I mean, like, clicking and stuff is natural, but there's stuff that's missing, right? There's stuff that like a
Um,
desktop somewhat. I mean, they're gonna have like a little bit of a desktop view with the next version. I forgot what they called it. They had a name for it. I just had it pulled up here too.
well, have you ever used Chrome OS?
Yeah.
So Chrome OS has a desktop, but you can't drag anything to it, right? So you kind of, if you're like me, like I often use the desktop as sort of a scratch space. I have temporary files there. If you're used to doing that, you're gonna have to adjust things. But if you are already just saving things to the file system and that's how you work, I mean, honestly, the iPad is a files app. It's fine. I mean, like I feel like that would work for a lot of people, or
Well,
you save files to the cloud or whatever.
let me when I say desktop, right? I Let
Mhm.
me clarify that. I mean the ability to have multiple apps stacked and on the display like a desktop, like a
Mhm.
traditional desktop. They're gonna have something
Okay.
called main menu, which could implement that.
Okay.
There's a concept here. So based on the leaks, there was something in the code that identified this. There's an image that I saw that somebody's kind of playing around with the idea of having a main menu where you could potentially have more than one application running, on the iPad. Once they do
Mhm.
that, I think that's when this thing becomes a competitor to the PC. I mean, right now it is, but in the traditional sense that you could have multiple applications kind of stacked on this menu, and you could
Yeah.
use it that way, or you could use the one main app. Do you think
I
that'll
mean,
be a pivotal moment for them?
I think we've already hit the pivotal moment. I think this is it. I think they're
This is
done.
it. You think
Yep.
with the mouse?
Yeah, that was all they had to do. I mean, they'll do more. I know there will be more. There'll be an iOS 14 and whatever, but or iPad OS. Um, this was it. This was the crucial moment. I mean, there are things that will happen. I mean, there are going to be third party and Apple branded keyboard and trackpad covers. I think that stuff's important. Um, but yeah, we were just talking about like a low cost iPhone. The iPad has been low cost for a long time. I mean, I know
Hmm.
there are more expensive versions too, but if you want to get into an iPad with a reasonably sized screen, you're talking about 400 bucks again, and then a keyboard cover, 100, whatever that is. For a lot of people, that's a much better deal and a much better buy than a low end PC. You know,
Yeah.
especially if it's not their primary device. They occasionally will need to clip on the keyboard and type something. I think it's I think it's there. You know,
I I mean the trackpad support obviously is going to be big, but I think once they add this stackable menu option where you could have
yeah,
multiple applications running in the
hmm
background and foreground, maybe it'll limit it to 3 or whatever. It doesn't matter right now because these
right.
things are pretty. You go on an iPad Pro and it's almost virtually it's a full-fledged
I know
computer
it's pretty
essentially.
beefy.
You could have Photoshop on there to some extent. You could have all the applications that you want.
Yep.
I Once they do that, I mean, really, and I was thinking about this. If I'm traveling, why wouldn't I? Because I like to have multiple things running. I hate going back and forth with the apps. Once you could do that, and you got the trackpad, and you got the keyboard, uh, this is a computer, and now you're kind of seeing why Apple phased out the MacBook. You know, the short, lightweight, mobile solution is
Right.
this. It always
Yep.
was this, but this now solidifies that.
hmm
uh, Interesting how this was not their vision, right? Initially,
Oh, they fought this.
so much.
And they could have done this years ago. I will never understand Apple when it comes to this kind of stuff, but you've experienced it even today when it's kind of half there because not all the apps support it fully. The way you move the cursor around and it kind of adapts to the thing you're mousing over or whatever. It's nice. Like it's very, like I said, it's very natural. Like I think they've done a good job with it. Um, we'll see how it evolves, but when people are looking at like, okay, sometimes I do need a big screen and a keyboard. I got to type a letter or work in a spreadsheet or something. I mean, I guess you could buy a computer. A lot of complexity there, um,
Or this.
or a Chromebook.
Yeah.
And I think I would, and I think most people would choose the iPad.
Yeah, right now I have a second gen or first gen, I can't remember. No, second gen iPad Pro, the big one.
Yeah,
The
yep.
17.9-inch one, I think that's the size, right, Paul? It's like 20
It's
inches big, this thing.
I think it's like
It's like a
13,
32 inch iPad.
12.9.
This thing feels. It does not feel like a 12.9.
No,
It,
yeah, yeah.
when I take this thing out, my son was so funny. He's
No, it's
like,
like at the beginning of Spaceballs, like you pull it out of the bag and it just
yeah,
keeps going
yeah.
and going. You know, like
I took this thing out because my daughter had the HP because she was watching something on there, and I kind of
mhm,
want her to learn how to type early. I feel like
sure.
handing a tablet to my kid, it doesn't really do anything, but she's like, now she learned how to do the trackpad and she could click on stuff and type a little bit. She knows how
Right.
to type like YOU and it'll pull up YouTube in the title bar.
Mhm.
So I gave my son the iPad. And my son goes, "This is a tablet?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "No."
Well, I mean, but most people are going to get the smaller ones,
Of course, yeah.
and again, I mean, an iPad's a great device just for reading, whatever, watching movies, whatever it is you want to do. But for those occasional times where you got to type something
Yeah.
significant, something that's not a text message. It's a school report or whatever it is. I mean, that extra real estate is going to really help, and
Yeah.
I
It,
think they've done it. It's weird. It came out like an iOS 13 point, what was it, 3 or 4 or so. It's like this inconsequential minor update, and it changed everything.
Listen,
Yeah.
here's the other thing, right? When obviously this is the path. There's no what if, there's no when. The trackpad
Yep.
support is here and it's a very real trackpad support. It's not the accessibility support that they had a while ago. This is
Right.
legitimate. So, now the question is, does Apple ever need to incorporate touchscreen on their Mac OS? Because that was the big thing. How come they're not doing it? They're holding off. They don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. Uh,
Yeah.
Now, what do they ever need to do it at this point? They
Um,
have the operating system that does all of it.
I mean, it would confuse things so much if they did that right now.
If they
Um,
added touchscreen or
you know what I
didn't add
mean?
it.
Like, I
Yeah.
talk about sending, mixed messages to people. I've always felt, though, like one of the advantages of having touch on your computers, and this would be very beneficial to Apple because of all of their, um touch, the mobile devices they have, is for developers who are making those apps. If you develop mobile apps on Windows, you can touch them on the screen. They work like they do on the device. Like, it's kind of nice. I know that's maybe not a huge audience compared to just general users, but that would be one reason.
Yeah.
And they're bringing iPad apps to the Mac. I mean, being able to touch
I'm gonna tell
those
you
would be
something
beneficial.
though. They're not good. I have
Right,
some of
right.
them. The ones that
No, I'm
Apple
not.
made are
Look, I'm
great.
not saying they will or won't. I just, it's something that you could make the case for it is all.
Let me go to the App Store. Did they add anything new from the last time we played this game? Let's see.
What's that?
Oh, let's see. Featured app. Be a pro PDF. Oh, thanks. They really don't have much here. Moleskin Journal.
Hmm.
I don't know. These guys. I don't think the jump over from. Listen, maybe the developers weren't there. That was their biggest problem. Developers didn't care to develop for the Mac. I mean, that's what it seems like to me more than anything else.
Right.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what it is. Anything on the Xbox side? I know that Microsoft is canceling events. Obviously, and everybody worldwide is canceling
Yeah.
events. What's going on now with the Xbox side? Anything new on that?
Nothing dramatic. I mean, they're claiming they're still on track to release the new console this year. They're expanding xCloud availability and preview to more countries in Europe. Like nothing, you know,
Yeah,
nothing dramatic. Xbox, I will say, I'm not on PlayStation, but I have not heard any reports. It seems like Xbox, PlayStation have been online and have been working during this, which is kind of nice.
yeah,
I mean, because it's this is when like shit gets real. Is like when you can't play Call of Duty or whatever. Um, that's when people are going to start eating each other. I mean, I just I don't know what disaster that would be, but
yeah.
so far so good.
Here's some questions. Paul,
Yeah.
will the Surface Duo unlock Quibi's full potential?
What? I don't even. That doesn't even make any sense. What are you? What are you talking about?
Quibi?
Quibi? I know what Quibi is. Why would it unlock? What does that mean? What are you talking about?
That was a question. I don't know. I thought you would know.
I. It's no what? It's just a no. It
No.
won't.
Okay. Any So PlayStation 5 released their portrait and landscape mode. That's what he's talking about. I don't think it's going to play an impact on it, to be honest. Uh, I don't think anybody's going to buy these products. I think it's going to be a
Yeah,
very select few, much like everything else, and they're going to go
yeah.
from
It's
there. I don't think that the market is. It was just a joke, by the way.
yeah.
I didn't get it until you said the portrait and landscape. I don't think here's the bigger thing here though, right? It kind of goes into it. It was a joke, but I
Yeah.
don't think that functionality is going to be appealing to most people. They're not going to know why they need two screens. I mean, how are some of these
Look,
dual
if you
screen
want to
displays
experience it
selling now?
today, take some masking tape and put it down the middle of your screen, and see how that works for you. If you if you like having a 1 inch thick black bar in the middle of two screens, I mean, maybe this is for you. I don't know, but I think that look, we're going to a future where devices are going to fold. You know,
Yeah.
and there is some sense to that. There's some sense to bringing up a phone-sized device, and then when you need to, opening it up to get a much bigger view of Google Maps or whatever. It makes sense in different scenarios for sure. But I mean, this dual screen thing that Microsoft's doing with hinges and stuff, it's like a weird steampunk kind of old-fashioned approach to a
2009.
problem that will be solved in the future.
2009. I mean, it's we're back 10 years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Here's a question: has Microsoft considered at all over the last year to enter into the tablet world with a smaller device?
Um,
I guess they're talking about a smaller Surface device that's more like a
well, yeah. I
tablet
mean,
then.
no. So obviously a year. Maybe not. Obviously, was it 2 years ago? A year ago? Seems like forever ago. They
The
released
stockpile
Surface
of
Go, which
Surface.
is a
Yeah.
smaller.
Yeah. I mean, the
But as
Surface.
far
No,
as like a
not the
mini
Surface
tablet
Go.
form factor,
Yeah, like
what's that?
didn't they have the smaller tablet that they were actually going to release it sitting in a warehouse somewhere?
Yeah, the Surface Mini, but that
Yeah.
was canceled because it was Windows RT, and that
Yeah.
was not going to work.
Yeah. Let me scroll here because I got some in my private email here. People sent me emails last week. Um, what
I think by
devices are you using currently? What phones are mobile devices are you currently using, Paul?
um, I've been rotating through phones ahead of some of the new releases. So I just finished reusing my iPhone 11 Pro Max, which I liked quite a bit. Before that, I was on the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra, and now I'm using the OnePlus 7T, which is the one they released last fall, which is a great phone too. But there'll be a Google Pixel 4a at some point. There will be that iPhone we talked about. There will be the OnePlus 8. Probably in the United States will be the 8 Pro, I would imagine.
Hmm.
I'll kind of move as we go. But I use, I think it's a 9.7-inch iPad to read in the morning. And I don't travel anymore like everyone else, but I would use it to watch movies and stuff on trips. And then computers, I've been using, I've had this thing for over a year now. I love it. I have an HP EliteBook X360,
Yeah.
which is a 14-inch. It's a convertible. I just use it as a laptop, but it's perfect keyboard, beautiful display, good battery life. Really nicely made. Um, if you follow like the programming stuff that I do on the site, that's the machine I'm using for Visual Studio. It's great.
Here's one. Will the Duo and Neo be stylus intensive, like for notes and stuff?
I don't think no. I mean, I mean, the Neo will support a stylus. I don't know that it will come with one. Actually,
Okay.
why am I saying that? Because it's a Surface device. I'm not sure they've ever explicitly said that. um, so let me retract that statement as I actually think about what I say. I would assume that both will support some form of stylus for
Yeah.
note taking. And of course,
Uh,
it flips around, so it's a tablet. Yeah, I mean, it would make sense the Neo would support the like all Surface devices do.
any news if Microsoft can provide more games for streaming in xCloud app now? This
Yeah,
first.
so Basically, xCloud is a licensing issue. I mean, what they're really doing is running Xbox Ones in a data center and streaming it out to the world. So um, I assume what they have to do is go back to the game publishers and say, "Look, this is another way to distribute your game. Are you okay with this?" Um, and there's already a reasonable collection of games there, but and it's still an early preview, so we'll see how that evolves. But I would imagine the point of this is like as if you went from an Xbox One to an Xbox One S or an Xbox One X or a Series X or whatever it is. You could likewise go to xCloud, and your collection goes with you. Um, so it's either going to be like 100%, or more likely it's going to be some percentage of what's available today on Xbox
Yeah.
One. But I think it's going to be
Yeah.
pretty broadly compatible.
I had one more here. How long does any idea how long Microsoft's going to stick to the Windows 10 name? Is there any? Do they want to stick
Yeah,
with it, or are they planning on just having it as Windows? Why even just have it Windows 10?
yeah. That was my argument. They should just call it Windows at this point. If they're going to not do versions or whatever, just Windows. But they announced Windows 10X late last year. That signals their intention to stick with Windows 10 as a brand. Of course, they just delayed it, so maybe maybe that will be part of the change. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
They do have a new guy running Windows today, so maybe he has a new idea about that. But I agree. When it should just be Windows at this point.
Yeah. Definitely. All right, guys.
Yep.
So if you're watching this live, stay tuned. We're going to continue recording. We're going to do What the Talk. If you listen to the podcast, do us a favor. Go subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/whatthetech. You go there, subscribe to us. Also, if you listen to the podcast, check out our YouTube page. YouTube.com/whatthetechpodcast. We're everywhere podcasts are available, but it helps us when you subscribe to the podcast as well, other than listening. For all things Paul, go to Thurrott.com, Thurrott Premium. You can sign up there. Great article today posted, the Windows 10 X problem. Really good story, really good article here, kind of explaining what's going on with Windows 10X in detail. Anything else, Paul? Anything coming up?
Nope.
Okay.
Just kind of home. So no.
Yep. Okay. All right, guys. That's it for this week. We will all see you later. Goodbye.